They told you the asylum collapsed inward, the night the patients vanished. But when the rusted latch slips under your thumb and the door clicks from inside, you realize the building has been holding its breath for you. Rain needles the roof. Shadows bleed into each other. Somewhere a metal tray skitters as if nudged by a patient too shy to knock. Your torch carves a trembling corridor where paint curls like dead moths and paperwork blooms from split drawers. Names crossed out, dates smudged, notes that read like prayers written with shaking hands. You step over a wheelchair fossilized in grime and feel the air change, cool and deliberate, as though the walls have turned to lungs. The silence isn't empty. It's busy. Stacks of charts whisper dry syllables. A call bell ticks once like a heart, restarting. When the elevator sighs in a dead shaft, the beam grazes a bulletin board, layered with mold, and tucked behind it, a brittle ledger titled, "Discharged without exit." The ink looks wet. The book opens on a rasp, paper cracking like old knuckles, and the names lift from the page as if they've been waiting for a mouth to read them aloud. You don't, because the ink looks wet again in the last column. Exit is a blank alley, where even the dust refuses to settle. A drip finds your neck and walks down your spine. You track the columns, admissions, diagnoses that read like riddles, remarks in a frantic second hand, and feel the hall arch toward you. Something shifts behind the nurse station, the small, courteous sound of drawers closing themselves. Then a page lifts. Your light catches the final entry. Its strokes heavier than the others, and you recognize a handwriting from a note found at the gate. The pen pressure is furious until it stops mid-letter, leaving a slash that points toward the cold corridor, toward the room where the air vibrates like plucked wire. The ledger sours your glove with a chemical ghost of ink, and the exit column waits like a dare. The corridor smells like cold metal and flooded basements, a taste of coins against teeth, and somewhere the hiss of a respiration mask keeps time with your pulse. The alphabetical tabs on a rust-bitten file cart squeal when moved, each letter releasing a new gust of chill as if names are stored with their winters inside. You pull a folder and feel the building stiffen like a stranger taking offense. The label peels, exposing another beneath it, and another under that, a nest of aliases coiled around the same person. The notes are clinical until they're not, pivoting into apology, into please, don't, written so small you nearly miss it. The words, remains on premises, are crossed out, then underlined as if both denial and declaration were tried. Behind you, a reflection occupies the darkened window, a posture like yours, but angled the wrong way. When you adjust, it delays before obeying. The silence rearranges itself, closing the door you left open without touching the handle. You move toward the storage door, only to hear the subtle, deliberate clearing of a throat from the other side, a human sound that carries the calm of an argument already won. The handle gives, resists, then slides like a compromise struck in the dark. When it opens, the room inside is smaller than the rumors made it. A box lined with orderlies' coats and a mirror propped against crates. Your light lands on a ring of key tags that share the same number, as if one key is pretending to be many. Footsteps pass outside, quick, purposeful, without the excuse of wind. The mirror coughs up an image one beat late, and in that beat something else passes behind you. It's nothing more than a middling shift in the air, a smell like thunder wrapped in antiseptic, but it lands in your bones as if kneeling there. The key ring turns without a hand, a small, tired rotation, and you decide the room is choosing, not you. Down the Ward C corridor, the temperature falls with purpose, frosting your breath into pearls that drop soundlessly to tile. The intercom crackles awake and dies, leaving a murmur of syllables too soft to own. You read the door placards without saying them, because the ledger made you cautious about giving anything more of a voice than necessary. The last door has a viewing slit like a patient's iris, and when your light threads it, The room inside shines with the varnished patience of a chapel. On the bed lies a single ID bracelet tangled around a page torn from the ledger. The ink bleeds into fabric like a wound practicing. Your hearing sharpens to catch the detail you always miss. Not the distant rattle or the thunder, but the shoes adjusting to your cadence, falling in after your steps, and stopping when you stop. You count to 3, move, stop again. They move, stop. It would be funny if your legs weren't remembering how to run. The corridor narrows until the air has to turn sideways to get past you, and every footfall answers with a second click that doesn't belong to your boots. Pipes along the ceiling tremble like teeth, chattering in the skull of the building, and through a buckled grate rises a draft that smells of wet paper and iodine. A basement's afterthought, escaping to whisper its corrections. You find the seam where the linoleum puckers, a blister in the floor that pulses when thunder rolls. Beneath it, something keeps time, a soft thud too steady for storm. The walls have developed patience, listening to your breathing with the immodesty of a confessional. You try to map the route in your head, but the angles keep doubling back, like hands that won't stop apologizing. When the overhead speaker coughs up a syllable, nothing intelligible, just the vowel of a name deciding whether to be spoken, the grate tingles under your palm. The second click resumes, closer now, and the floor decides to sound hollow. Stairs surrender to a room that forgot windows, and the dark below folds around you like a heavy coat held by someone you can't see. Water has collected in trays where therapy once occurred, reflecting a wavering geometry that redraws your faces into strangers. The hum you followed is louder here, not mechanical, more like the drag of a pen refusing to lift from the page. Shelves hold jars sleeping in brown glass, labels slurred by mold until only the first letters read true. You make no attempt to complete them. A filing cabinet yawns with drawers open as if mid-argument, and the floor answers each step with an attentive creak that seems to measure intent rather than mass. Somewhere a chain knocks metal, pauses, knocks again, auditioning for a pattern it cannot keep. When your light swings across the wall, a chalk grid shines faint under salt bloom, boxes filled with numbers scratched out and replaced, over and over, until the chalk dust forms drifts like unfallen snow. Something has been keeping score. On a work table buckled by damp, a stack of forms sleeps under a cracked paperweight shaped like a dove, and the top sheet wears the same columns as the ledger upstairs, only these boxes aren't blank. The exit line holds a symbol that could be a 0 or a mouth. The ink has bled into capillaries of fiber, arteries blooming outward from surnames that should not still hum in the building's throat. You measure the margin with a fingertip and feel the paper twitch as if refusing to be touched. A draft answers by turning the page, not to the next entry but to a carbon copy of the one you're on. The same hand. The same pressure. The same impatient tail on the final letter. The room inhales with you, and when you exhale, exhales late. A timer unreels somewhere behind the walls, with the soft resolve of cloth tearing. You test the symbol with your light and it shivers, a near circle that seems to listen. And you understand that columns here don't record departures. They keep time. At the far end, a fire door leans inward, like it is tired of being a boundary. Paint bubbled into small blisters that itch the eye. The bar refuses until you set your shoulder, then gives with a cough of cold air that smells of rain pressed through concrete. The tunnel beyond is the color of a swallowed coin, and the breeze moves in a direction you can't plot, carrying a whisper like paper, skimmed by fingertips. Floor markings fade, reappear, skip, as if time lost its place and circled back for another try. You halt when the wind returns carrying a sound you know too well. The exact cadence of your approach, replayed a few beats behind. A mockingbird with steel in its throat. The light catches emergency signage that still glows faintly, and your shadow fixes to the wall an instant after you've stopped moving. The door slams of its own accord and stays closed, though you didn't push it. The echo runs down the tunnel and doesn't come back for a long while, as if it found better company ahead. The tunnel rises into a ward that keeps its lights by habit. Dim cubes breathing over beds made with reverence. No staff remains to provide. On each pillow lies a single paper strip cut from forms you've already seen, placed where a head would rest, as if to preload the dream with instructions. The intercom clears its throat again and becomes a voice you almost recognize. But it isn't words. It's a melody of syllables that the tongue of a building would choose if asked to sing. Doors along the wall list open at identical angles, obedient as metronomes, and from the final room a draft carries a scent, like turned pages warmed by hands. You don't speak the names you've memorized, yet the room behaves as if you have, shifting its attention, air thickening around your ribs as pressure recalibrates. Somewhere beyond, a small bell rings once, precisely the ceremonial note that punctures denial without cruelty. The paper slips rustle, aligning themselves against your breath, and you understand that attendance has been taken. The ward exhales you into a records corridor that feels narrower than geometry allows, and the light caught in its dust behaves like it has been rehearsing, glittering in pulses that match the rhythm under the floor. Stacks of clipboards have been arranged in ranks along the wall, and each bears a date that refuses to stay still, numbers wavering the way heat does over asphalt. You move with your breath leashed short, convinced that if it runs, the dark will chase it. From somewhere ahead, a single hinge sounds like a throat clearing before a bad confession. The corridor ends in a glass office where a typewriter waits with its mouth open, carriage centered as if listening. Keys lift and settle with no fingers over them, teasing a word that won't consent to being born. You touch the space bar, and the machine responds by ratcheting once, dignified, as if acknowledging an appointment missed years ago. The ribbon's scent rises, metallic and sweet, and a page feeds itself forward, blank except for the watermark of a ledger's columns, faint and ready. Inside the office, cabinets hunker like animals who learned obedience late, and the glass, scabbed with tape from a long-ago break, shows your shapes on delay as if the room is thinking through your presence before allowing it. Folders open under your hands to reveal carbon sheets that print the same entry multiple times, each impression slightly angrier than the last, pressure deepening until the letters bruise the paper. A breeze teases through a vent that should be dead, and lifts a page just enough to reveal a second date beneath the first. Like the building preferred a revision. The hum you've been chasing changes pitch, no longer beneath the floor, but stirred inside the paper itself. A murmuration of fibers agreeing on a direction. You hold the page near the lamp and the watermark columns brighten. Admission, diagnosis, remarks. And then the final box glows with the soft disobedience of a nightlight. The shape inside it is neither zero nor letter, but a mouth, round and listening. And the air in your throat tightens with the ridiculous urge not to be overheard by a page. The typewriter finally accepts its assignment with a crisp clack, a syllable you feel in your teeth. Keys dance into a rhythm older than any electricity still threaded through the asylum, and the carriage creeps left like a slow tide. T. Letters arrive in a careful hand the machine should possess, names you have rehearsed silently, now appearing without permission, followed by notations that refuse medical calm. Some entries switch midline into a script you don't recognize, rounded, impatient, as if the writer is walking too fast for ink. A bell rings at the end of the line and the page shudders. Then the final box prints itself not with characters but with a tiny graphite oval, as if a pencil laid its head there and sighed. You step back and the machine halts respectful. Step forward and it resumes eager. The sensation that you're being evaluated grows louder than the storm. In the glass, the reflection of the page shows different words than the page itself. And the difference is not a trick of angle but of choice, the building deciding what to show. Leaving the office is like stepping off a moving walkway you didn't know you were on. The corridor's silence returns with a weight that sets your shoulders low. Doors along the hall hold their breath as you pass, each window slit glossy with darkness thick enough to be a liquid. The storm outside rains itself to a steady drizzle, a rehearsal beat. And with the new quiet comes a sequence of light flickers traveling ahead of you in measured hops, as if an invisible hand is testing switches in order. The air sharpens to the scent of linen and a cleaner that has learned to mimic citrus long after the fruit is gone. An orderly station appears with its chair angled just so, a posture that implies the owner left to fetch a form and never corrected the angle upon returning. A pen rolls across the desk to the edge, stops as if reminded of rules. Somewhere behind, the hinge clears its throat again. Softer this time, and the corridor inhales with you. Then chooses not to exhale. You reach the ward with the tidy beds again, but the careful symmetry has shifted. Pillows are indented with absent heads, blankets pulled to a height that implies someone sat up, listened, and lay back down to reconsider. The brass bell waits with the gravity of a ritual, and when your sleeve grazes the nightstand, it answers with a single dignified note. The intercom responds, not with voice, but with the sound of paper turning in a room that should entail left to turn. The strips on each pillow breathe. No other word fits, lifting and settling in a tide that ignores the fact of their weightlessness. You say nothing and discover that silence is precisely what the place wanted, because in the quiet the doorways fill with the idea of silhouettes, an insistence of presence that fogs the edges of the light. Somewhere far down the hall, the typewriter offers one last clack, and the hum under the floor aligns with your pulse. The mouth-shaped box in your mind opens wider. Roll call complete. You lay the copied forms in a line as if building a small bridge across water you can't see. And the symbols in the final boxes dilate, round as held breath, until the paper seems to drink the room. The hum in the walls abandons its disguise as plumbing and becomes a choir of restrained vowels, the sound wet ink makes when it hasn't decided who it belongs to. Somewhere a bell considers ringing and declines. A mercy you don't deserve. Your light combs the corners and returns carrying motes that arrange themselves into the ghost of handwriting. Letters reversed as if read in a mirror. They evaporate the second you try to understand. The tiles underfoot flex like a diaphragm learning a new rhythm, and you have the sudden, childish instinct to stand on the bed frames, because the floor has learned your name. The page at the end of the line curls its edge toward your hand. You don't touch it, but the curl continues anyway, until the paper forms a shallow cup, a listening throat. The intercom wakes with a noise like rain put through a sieve, and from the sifted static a rhythm assembles, spare and certain. 3 beats and a pause, then 3 again. The exact pattern of your steps since you entered this. Wing. Dot. You hold still, and the speaker obliges with stillness, a mirror practicing kindness. When you move again, the sound maps you, drawing a chalk outline in the air that your body keeps filling. Notices pinned along the corridor breathe outward, paper lifting from rusted tacks as if trying to see. You pass the observation window for a seclusion room, and your reflection hesitates, lagging behind like a reluctant witness, then catches up with a small, chastened nod. On the far wall, a staff rhoda curls into a funnel that points to a name that never got its end date. The fluorescent above it flutters a staccato code you refuse to learn, because once you do, you'll be responsible for answering. The speaker clears its throat, and this time the pause feels like a question. The door marked for the ward you avoided opens an inch without complaint, like a mouth making room for a spoon. Inside, glass panels ring a pit, where a chair waits with its straps coiled into polite loops. The ceiling surrenders a slow drip that lands on the seat with a patience bordering on fondness. You survey the observation glass and find your shape stacked there in multiples, each pane an opinion about your posture. Some braver than you feel. One turned just enough to watch the exit, rather than the chair. A treadmill of scuff marks around the perimeter implies someone walked here long after closing, rehearsing the distance between staying and leaving. The air remembers antiseptic, but has learned mildew. A compromise sent, like formal apologies, made late. A card clipped to the rail lists protocols in a hand too neat for the room, ending with the instruction, "Remain present." The glass answers with a smear forming from nothing. A fingertip pushed from the other side, dragging a key. Line, "You don't have the courage to read yet." A chime rings down the shaft that should be dead. A bright, municipal sound innocence would trust. And somewhere below, a counterweight sighs like a sleeper rolling over. The grating nudges its own track and halts shy of open, the machine remembering manners it no longer needs. You edge close, and wind from the shaft brings the scent of wet brick and paper, warmed by hands. Impossible heat from the lower floors. The indicator above the doors ticks a floor at a time, skipping none, obedient to a schedule no living body called for. When it arrives, the doors part and reveal a car, lit by a single emergency strip, floor dusted with footprints that face inward. No exit impressions to balance them. A hospital blanket is folded with ceremony in the corner, a promise of comfort offered by an empty host. You wait for a reason not to step inside and receive only a quiet that feels like a raised eyebrow. The speaker above the panel crackles into 3 soft beats, and the suggestion of your name. The elevator delivers you to a floor whose number has been scraped away, an erasure so careful it reads as affection. Doors line the hall like listeners at confession, each one ajar just enough to be plausible. You choose the room that feels least interested, the humility making it trustworthy, and step into a space arranged as if for you. A desk at the precise height for your lean, a chair angled to favor your weaker knee, a window that offers nothing to look at but encourages looking anyway. On the desk, a ledger fragment lies under a tumbler etched with a ring of dried water. Beside it, a pencil sits sharpened to a mean point, its shavings cupped like a small nest. The air settles the way rooms do after laughter, not happier, just finished. When you shift your weight, the boards under the rug respond with a note you've already taught them, and the room answers by turning one page in the fragment, though there's no wind. The exit box waits, a small held breath, asking if you intend to use it. The room's quiet has the soft grain of old wood rubbed by countless careful hands, and the pencil waits with its sharpened breath pointed toward the blank that pretends to be a choice. You hold still long enough to feel the building align small gears. The drip behind the wall ratchets into intervals. The floorboard near the door learns not to complain. The window finds its reflection and rehearses it. Across the paper, those pale watermark columns skim forward like ribs under skin. And the last square, the round, listening mouth, widens in courtesy rather than threat. You do not intend to write. You intend to observe your way out. But the pencil skates when your sleeve brushes it, and the lead leaves a mark shaped like your hesitation, a smudged oval that resembles every exit you've avoided. Air presses against your ears as if depth were increasing. Somewhere above, a bell tries to remember its note and gives up, and the page, relieved, turns itself slightly toward the hand you keep refusing to be. The hallway beyond greets you with the patient patience of an institution that has outlived its reason. Lights lifting one by one like eyelids deciding to stay open. On a cart sits a metal clipboard, immaculate, waiting where no hands should have left it. The sheet beneath the clip bears the same columns and that circular bruise of an exit, yet each line carries the gentleness of bedside notes, written for a reader who might wake frightened. Air here tastes faintly of starch, and the dull sweetness of dissolved tablets, and the doors lean in, as if privy to news they mean to keep. Your footfalls settle into the intercom's 3-beat cadence, and the speaker, pleased, hums close without speaking. When you pass the final room, the bell inside gives a courtesy tap, and the pillow breathes a little, as if adjusting to a head that weighs only memory. The cart rolls on its own for a length you could explain as slope, then stops where you plan to stop, the kindness of coincidence performing as designed. You return to the office with the taped glass and find the typewriter patient as furniture, carriage centered in a posture of listening. The ribbon has darkened, not with use, but with readiness, a stain that anticipates pressure. You set the pencil beside the keys as a peace offering, and the machine accepts by flexing its return lever a fraction. A nod carried in metal. The chair fits your spine as though an absence measured you earlier, and from the vent, a draft rises with the breath temperature of someone polite. You wait for questions that don't arrive. Instead, drawers ease open to reveal carbon sheets in threes, the trinity of record, memory, and rumor. The first line on the page writes itself. Not your name, not theirs, but a shared pronoun that feels like a hand extended. The final box begins to darken with graphite, not yet present. Like thunder rehearsing across bone. You realize the room is interviewing your silence, and you are answering with everything you're trying not to admit. When you step back into the tunnel, the air closes over the doorway with the ceremonial softness of a curtain call, and something small you didn't know you dropped. Perhaps a word you refused, skitters ahead and waits for you to claim it. Floor markings you swore were gone have returned as if repainted by patience, arrows that point both ways and mean it. Your light grazes a wall where scuffs loop in figure eights, repetition worn ecstatic, and the shape lures your steps until you recognize the path as the one you paced upstairs when the ledger first breathed. The building is handing you back your habits, cleaned and folded. A gurney emerges from shadow without rolling, stationed as if it had remembered you from a different shift, and intends no harm. The overhead strips brighten and dim, practicing the threshold between welcome and warning. Ahead, the elevator indicator wakes without being called, and before it moves, the bell above it whispers a single beat more than you've been counting. The extra note, an invitation, and a price. You return to the room that fitted itself to you and find the pencil where you didn't leave it. Centered on the page, point resting inside the open mouth of the exit box, as delicately as a thermometer under a tongue. Rain has settled into its patient grammar, commas tapping the sill, and the floorboards hold their breath to listen. You think of the list you found first, the names that learned to walk halls without bodies, and you understand the bargain finally. The exit here is not departure, but admission. A signature that acknowledges presence so thoroughly, it stops needing proof. Your hand hovers. The pencil rises enough to touch skin, and the lead makes a small sound like a satisfied seed. You do not write a name. You draw a circle that nearly closes and leaves the slightest gap. A refusal that reads as respect. The room accepts. The bell upstairs answers once, and down the corridor paper sighs as if beds are unmade. Attendance complete, but not consent. The mouth on the page becomes an ear again. The corridors meet and separate like arguments that won't concede, and the lights adopt a bedside manner, softening when you look up, sharpening when you look away, tutoring your uncertainty into a pace the building approves. Beds breathe without bodies, their sheets rising the way a lie rises when it thinks no one is listening. And the bell that used to puncture denial now keeps time with your blood. You try the old rules. Announce yourself. State intent. Do not provoke. But the place edits them in transit. What leaves your mouth returns as paper shiver and hinge throat cough. A grammar where nouns don't need people. A draft advances before you like a polite usher, steering you toward a door whose window is black glass until it remembers how to reflect. In that momentary mirror, you're arranged into a trio of silhouettes that have learned to walk in step with the hum beneath the floor. Beyond the glass, the dark looks crowded, as if nothing is there, and all of it is standing close, waiting its turn to be witnessed. The intercom adopts restraint, trading coin scrape static for the hush of a library after rain, and within that hush the suggestion of syllables collects like steam on tile. It does not choose words, it chooses your pauses. Each breath you refuse to take becomes a note. The ceiling learns to hum, and the sum of those notes sketches a careful path through rooms that remember restraints, the way scars remember shape. A schedule pinned to cork shows days collapsing into each other like damp pages, check marks sliding to realign under an hour that never ends. You touch nothing, and the doors perform anyway, opening to angles you were about to request, closing like polite refusals that don't require reasons. The floor leans a degree toward a room you promised not to revisit, the one where glass learned your outline too quickly. When you resist, the lights hesitate in what feels like disappointment rather than malfunction. You understand then that the building is not asking you to believe anything. It is asking you to continue. The office with the taped glass receives you the way a sea receives a returning oar, with a patience that implies it never doubted your route. The typewriter rests, carriage-centered as if to demonstrate neutrality. Yet the ribbon has advanced a line you did not earn. The carbon sheets wait in triplicate, their edges perfectly skewed, and beside them a stack of forms holds the watermark columns you've learned like ribs. You listen for what you missed before. A faint drag at the edge of hearing. Not keys, not vent, but the sound of a sharpened point describing circles on paper until friction produces heat. You find the page in the tray already warm. Ink has developed without witness, neat entries aligned under admission and diagnosis, while the final box remains a small, poised mouth. In the margin, a note in a hand that did not belong to staff apologizes for the weather in a room that never had a window. You think to leave the page untouched, but the air develops the gravity of a bedside request. Refusal becomes a shape you can feel. The service tunnel returns like a sentence you've been saving, its green strips breathing in unison with the hum underfoot. Halfway down, a steel door gives up a seam of light thin as a paper cut, and beyond it, a corridor you do not remember discovering arranges itself with numbered plaques that have learned to speak without numbers. Each plaque shows a tone instead, low, mid, high, and as you walk, they sing a stepwise ascent that matches the way your fear clocks itself. On the walls, portraits printed in the ghostly chemistry of mildew emerge, not faces but the negative space where faces resisted erasure. A draft cools and warms in alternating bands, like standing in a memory of stairwells traveled too often. The elevator at the far end offers its responsible chime uncalled, and the car stands open with its blanket folded in the posture of remedy. You look back and the corridor shortens by a door's width, a kindness disguised as a trap, or a trap disguised as kindness. Either way, the arithmetic favors forward. The car does not move so much as decide to be elsewhere, and the indicator declines to count, preferring the honesty of no numbers. When the doors part, the room beyond has the quiet of a chapel that has made peace with dust. A desk, a chair that remembers the angle of 1,000 spines, a window convinced it looks out even though it doesn't, and on the desk a page you recognize though you have not seen it. The first list, rewritten to accept edits from the present tense. The bell above and the intercom below reach an agreement and settle into one patient tone that neither urges nor forgives. You approach, and the box at the end accepts your nearness as language, darkening without touch, a closing parenthesis that still leaves space for breath. In the hallway, beds unmake themselves just enough to count as invitation rather than disorder. You feel the building waiting for the smallest verb you can afford. Stay, witness, listen. The page acquires a new crease where your shadow falls, and the room, satisfied, keeps its door closed. The page on the desk has grown the patience of tide charts, a calendar of breaths rather than days, and each column has learned to refuse finality, offering instead a circle that swells and rests like a listening lung. The quiet owns the room the way memory owns a smell. It presses close but leaves you speaking space. The hum beneath the floor finds your pulse and steadies it into thirds, and for once you don't fight the rhythm. Outside the door, the corridor practices footsteps you haven't taken yet, a rehearsal in soft soles that favors mercy over surprise. You trace the watermark ribs with a gloved fingertip and they answer with heat, the small warmth of paper beheld by intent. A chair somewhere adjusts itself, relieved to be useful. The notion arrives without ceremony. The missing were never gone, only misfiled into a tense. The town refused to read. The bell upstairs holds its note like a coin on a tongue, waiting for you to spend it. When the page sighs and edges toward you, the room makes no threat, only a promise that being seen will be mutual. The hall receives you with beds already confessing to dreams, sheets lifting in a tide that times itself to your chest. Night lights burn like patient stars, and each doorway frames a darkness that feels curated, rather than empty. Galleries of breath and withheld motion. You try the old superstition and do not speak, yet the air replies anyway, drafting your syllables with a courtesy that embarrasses. On a nightstand, the brass bell wears its reflection like a halo scuffed by use. When your sleeve ghosts it, the single note lands without echo, the sound of a diagnosis you can live with. Paper slips stir on pillows and settle again, a quorum voting to continue. Between the beds, your light crosses and returns with a new gravity, as if it has learned the names you refuse to say. Far down the corridor, a door you left open settles shut, as if tugged by a sleeve, and the wind that follows is indoor wind, born of shared intention. Attendance here is not roll, call, but consent to be present. The ward pronounces you and waits for your agreement. The stairwell you avoided has learned a softer spiral, rust rings wearing a sheen like kindness, and water threads the rail without dripping, as if rehearsing restraint. Each step issues a tone, low, mid, high, that matches the plaques in the hidden corridor, and your feet choose the harmonies without discussing it with your head. The air changes by degrees you can taste, iodine thinning to rain, rain thinning to paper, warmed by palms, paper thinning to breath, shared by many and owned by none. Half a landing up, the wall offers a map, scratched in cleaner lines than your memory allowed, arrows that no longer contradict one another. You realize the route has never been physical. It is a choreography of consent between rooms and the people who refuse to be erased by them. At the top, a door with no label waits with the patience of a page before the first word. When you push, it pushes back, not in denial but in reminder, and then yields, letting you keep your share of the effort. The hinge remembers your approach and declines to clear its throat. Beyond the door lies a room arranged like an apology offered without excuses, a table that remembers arguments finished well, chairs angled for listening rather than leverage, and a window that insists on reflecting what matters instead of what's outside. Oh, the intercom doesn't speak. It breathes with you until the cadence matches a kind of truce. On the table rest copies of the list in triplicate, sorted not by name, but by whether each line has learned to answer to footsteps. The mouth-shaped boxes are ears now, round and attentive, and the columns no longer announce categories but invite testimony. You sit because sitting is the grammar here. Staying is the verb allowed. The ceiling waits out your hurry until it falls away, and then the room becomes large enough to hold the notion that the missing never intended to leave you without an address. A whisper crosses the table like a page turning itself. You do not sign. You place your palm over an open circle and feel the faint, relieved warmth of something accounted for. When the hallway gathers again around you, its length feels newly honest, not shorter, just true. Lights rise in a line that doesn't perform. The elevator waits but does not insist, its blanket folded into a square that reads as benediction rather than bait. You pass it, and the bell stays silent, pleased with your math. At the front, the lock that once clicked from inside lies easy under your thumb, and the building exhales. Not a dismissal, but release from a posture it held for you. Rain receives you like a nurse who has seen worse and expects better. Behind, papers will keep breathing until their circles become whole in their own time. Ahead, The town will pretend to be surprised. You do not carry names out. You carry the cadence that remembers them. When the door settles, it does so without finality. The seam keeps a sliver of light, the color of patient ink. The last thing you hear is the bell upstairs, single and exact, not a warning but a record. Present, present, present.